Hey guys, welcome back to episode number 2 of our Picture This podcast. Today we're here with longtime journeyman privateer turned factory rider and multiple race winner, Alex Martin. What's going on, Alex? How are you, man?
Not too much. How you doing, Brent?
Just living the dream over here. Hey, it looks like I'm surprised it's still light back there. Were you back in Minnesota? You still got some sun out or what?
Yeah, we're pretty far north, so we get a lot of sun pretty late in the afternoons in the summers. It's actually pretty nice. It's kind of the flip side in the wintertime, but I don't know. It's really nice and green as you can see right now. So I love it up here in the summertime.
Yeah, it definitely looks a lot different than California at this time. It's pretty dry and hot around here. So, especially where I live.
Mm.
Um, Hey man, before we hit record, we're talking about it. You raced Supercross this year in the 450 class or in 2022, and
Mm.
then you retired. That was your last year. Are you enjoying retirement? Do you miss it a little bit? We had the national at Spring Creek in your backyard a couple weeks ago, or about a
Mm.
month or so ago now. Did you wish you're out there, or are you happy with your decision?
Yeah, we were talking about this a little bit before we got on the air, but definitely not. So I grinded for a long time, to 2016 where I got my first factory ride. And then from there, like just the pressure and the expectations of being on factory teams, like you're getting paid well, yes, but the expectations to win are always there, and that definitely wears on you over time. So I mean, by the time really, there was probably the second or third race of Supercross the year I retired where I was like, all right, like I'm over it. But then I had to still go through like 14 more Supercrosses. But yeah, the only time I've really gotten an itch was like there was one mud race in Supercross where I was like, man, I probably could have done pretty good. And then for the Millville, like the week leading up to the Millville National, I was definitely kind of not getting the itch, but just like sad that I wasn't racing just because I've raced in Millville, especially 15 years in a row. So that streak essentially was ended, when I didn't race this year, which was kind of a bummer. I almost wanted to race just to keep the streak going, but at the same time, my wife was like, no. So I just said, yes, honey.
Yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like if there was ever going to be one that you would do a one-off race on, then it would be that one. Who
Mm.
knows? Maybe in the future you'll just pop in for fun. But I know you're busy right now with your troll training program you have going on. You have a lot of riders in that program, not only professionals, but vet riders, amateur riders. That being going pretty good.
Yeah, that's really taken off a lot. I've been able to put a lot of time in it over the winter, and it's really cold, snowy, and icy up here. So I spent a lot of time just doing more videos, trying to interact with the athletes. And I feel like that in our advertising too, and kind of learning. It's one thing to race dirt bikes; it's a whole other thing to have like a business, and then you're really learning the marketing, advertising side of it. And so trying to figure out what works, what doesn't. But honestly, I think it's been really good for me, like mentally, just to be communicating with guys that are still in the sport. Because it's not like I just cut it out of my life completely and moved on. Because I mean, ultimately, I think you see even with like James coming back and being an announcer, like it's hard to just cut it out completely when you've been doing it your whole life. So I appreciate being able to communicate and kind of pass down the things I learned to our guys. And we've got a really good group of people we work with. So I'm pretty fortunate.
Yeah, no, that's cool, and that's all you guys have done. Is ride dirt bikes your whole life. So to just retire and kind of walk away, it has to be kind of weird. So it's cool that you're still connected in some point.
Yep.
Well, cool. Hey, I'm gonna pull up some photos. Like I said, I try to pick some memorable moments of your career, and you had a long career. You turned pro in 2008, and so really that's
Mm.
what I want to jump to is your first race basically as a pro was 2008 Millville. Um,
Eh.
what goes through your mind when you see this photo? It's your first race, 2008, after racing amateur for a long time, and you make your debut at your home track.
Yeah, it's crazy to think I look so much smaller then, but I probably really haven't grown much since then. Man, I mean that's yeah, 2008. So I just come off of Loretta Lynn's. I actually had a crash at Loretta's in one of the motos. I was chasing Vince Freeze around. And so I wasn't able to finish Loretta's in my last year there. And I think it was maybe I feel like we had at least 3 or 4 weeks before Millville, but I don't know. So I was kind of nursing an arm injury coming into that race and got the approval from the doctor to race, and it had an absolutely awful first moto. I think I got ran over in the third corner. I think I just rode around really, just finished it out. And then the second moto, I had a better start and ended up getting 14th. And I think I battled with like Dan Reardon or something for a while. He was on Geico Honda at the time. But man, I look back at that and I just think like had no idea. I had no idea what the physical demands, the mental demands, like even just the equipment I was on, how far off that was. Um, yeah, so that seems like another lifetime ago.
I know you think back. I mean, that was a long time ago, 2008. You know, bikes obviously are a lot were a lot different back then. And you
Mm.
mentioned coming off Loretta's, and think about the program that you went through coming up as an amateur compared to now, with all the things they have, like the combines and Supercross futures and all that. And they can even pop into a few nationals. Where back then it's like, I think I'm ready. We're gonna go give it a shot.
Yeah, I mean, my preparation was terrible. I can tell you that right now, just being honest. Like, there was no such thing as a facility. There might have been MTF maybe at that time, but that was about it. I mean, in Minnesota, like Jeremy and I, we would just ride Millville, and I mean, we didn't have any sort of like moto structure. Like, we just would get home from school, and we had an hour meter on our bike, and we would just try and ride 2 or 3 hours, like literally put 2 or 3 hours on our hour meter. And I remember at one point in time that summer, I was like, man, I feel like if I don't ride 5 days in a row, like if I take a day off somewhere in there, I feel better. But that was like literally the extent of it. Like I would go for bike rides here or there. I didn't do any strength stuff, any gym. I mean, I just had no idea, what it took. And then you just kind of like see all the guys winning in the pro ranks, and you're like, man, like I have no idea how I'm ever going to get to that point.
Yeah, it's crazy to think, it was a long time ago, but not super, what let's call it 50, what is it, 15 years ago. But it's crazy, like now you're on the training side, what you know now compared to what you knew then.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's why it's cool with what you're doing is you can help, pass that message along to the younger guys that maybe not know what they're doing, to where if you knew that information back then, your career could have took off even quicker than it did. But you in that photo right there, you're just out there riding. You thought you're prepared, but again, you don't know what a 30+2 is really at that intensity. So it just had to be an eye opener.
Yeah, I actually was having this conversation with Phil Nicoletti a while back. It's like there's something about moto, like you vividly remember almost every track that you've raced, Supercross and motocross. You remember the number you have each year, the gear you wore, everything. And like I remember all of that for those like 15 years of my career, where I feel like if you were to go off to college and like it just blurs together a little bit more. But for like being a motocross racer, especially professional, where we were changing numbers every year, it seems like much more vivid.
Yeah, definitely. And you got 20th overall, like you mentioned. I think the first moto, I wrote it down. You went, like 20. You went 29th the first moto, like you said. You had a wreck or whatever, but you bounced back and got a 14th to your second moto. So you had to been pretty stoked with that for your first race. Not really knowing where you stood. You probably redid that. Were you surprised by the result, or did you think that that was kind of where you could put it?
um, nah, like I said, I had no idea what to expect. I remember I didn't sleep at all the night before. I was really, really nervous. So I was definitely pretty sleep fatigued coming into that day. But I had no expectations other than just go out and ride for that one. So I mean, the 14th I was pretty pumped on for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So you go from there, you raced a couple more outdoors that year, and then you really just went into the full swing of things, Supercross and motocross from, 2009 until you stopped doing it in 2022. And I know, like we talked about it before we hit record, you were, longtime privateer. And I think you really started making a splash when you got on your, one of your favorite bikes was that 1110 Mods Honda. You and Durham, and I think even Izzy was on it for a year or so.
Mm.
Those things were known for getting good starts, but they're also known for maybe not staying together. What comes to your mind this year? This is 2011 Southwick. I think it was your best overall finish so far in your career. It was a fourth overall. You got a top 5 in Washougal that year too, I think. But this is when it kind of all started to come around for you.
Yeah, I look back at that. That was a really like defining point of my not only my professional career but my life. I mean, I look back at like the gear and the number and the bike, and like I love that bike. I absolutely love that bike for sure. Like it was really really fast. I think the horsepower that Chad Sanner was getting out of that thing, like it took a long time for other teams. I mean, man, even hearing some of like the numbers of the Club Yamaha was putting out this year, I'm like, I think that bike might have still been faster. And that was back in like 2011,
Yeah.
2012. Like he was really ahead of his time. Like he had such a knowledge on like how to map a bike. He would spend hours and hours on a dyno. So no, that was really cool. I mean, obviously towards the end of it, it kind of fizzled out and, everybody was kind of looking for more. I got to say, like, I did have some blown up engines for sure. but nowhere near as many as Phil did.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Yeah.
Phil, I got the absolute shaft there, but I mean, for me, it wasn't quite that bad. But yeah, so that race though, in particular, Southwick 2011, just pitting out of the black box fan and me and Durham. But so the first moto, I think I got 10th, and which was pretty solid. I think I'd been getting a pretty consistent string of top tens each moto at that point. And then the second moto, I believe I got the whole shot, and I led for a couple laps at least. And then I think Dino or Rattray passed me, and then I ran second for like 20 minutes, and then I ended up getting third. So, I mean, that was definitely a very career defining moment for me. Just knowing that I could be on the podium. You know, it was my third season, I think, right,
Yeah.
as a pro.
Mhm.
I mean, that was just super cool. I think that week actually, it's kind of funny. So my brother and I, we were riding together in Minnesota. He was an amateur Suzuki guy for, uh, what's the guy's name? The Ed Torrance amateur team there. So he used to do like the extreme team green thing with
Mhm.
Bobby Hewitt. And my brother was B class, and he was like faster than me during the week in B class. And I podiumed. So I'm like, wow, shoot, I guess even though my little bro's faster than me, I'm okay for podium.
Yeah, it had
Yeah.
to have been interesting before your brother turned pro. Obviously, he was going really fast, and but you were doing. Obviously, that's when you started doing really good, and like you said, you got on podium there, had some good rides. Had to have been weird though, going back home and riding with him, and he's in the B class. You're like, wait a second, this doesn't make sense.
hmm Yeah. But no, so actually in that week though, in particular, Monday I rode, blew a bike up, and I was so pissed that I went and ran like 10 miles that night, and then got up the next day and ran 10 miles. And so I ran quite a bit that week just to try and make up for my bike blowing up. And then yeah, when I podiumed that weekend, I'm like, man, maybe I need to do that every week.
Yeah, and that's one thing that really sticks out for me is on those for you on that year, and even those you all you guys on the 1110 mods Honda back then was, man, you guys were always ripping starts on those things. I remember watching a helmet cam. I think it was High Point with Izzy and Durham, and they're out front for the first lap, and it was just wide open, like it was the craziest helmet cam, and you guys were pulling starts on those bikes against all the factory bikes. So that was a cool year. And how long were you on the 1110 mod team?
So 2010, 2011, and 2000, or no, not 2010, 2011, 12, and part of 13.
Yeah.
So yep.
Yeah, no, it's so in 2000, so you got a fourth there, then you got Washougal, and then, I mean, 2015, you get onto, I think you got onto Rock River is when you started on your Yamaha stint, and then, I go here to Oakland, 2015 Supercross. It was your first Supercross podium. Um, Again, you aren't on a factory team then, you're still on a privateer effort. But what was this moment for you to, think about it's almost 7 years into your career, and specifically on Supercross, you find, you get your first podium.
Yeah, so there was a lot of years there where I was like, man, I'd been top 10, and like I'd gotten the podium at Southwick, and I'd had some top fives. And I remember coming in this year, it was not, I don't want to say Hail Mary, but it was just like, all right, like I'm gonna move to California. I went live with my friends, the Schaefers, and I was riding the Yamaha test track, and it was the first like year of my career where I ditched the East Coast type of program. And I was like, I'm gonna go west and just see what that's all about. Try the West Coast Supercross and just try and get a little bit, just try that out.
Mhm.
Um, and I mean, it really paid off. And because coming up to this point, I was just like, man, I don't know what else it's going to take for me to get a factory ride. I wanted to get a factory ride so bad. And like the privateer thing, just, you're not getting paid a lot of money. I had to do my own bike work. I mean, I was at this point in time, I was this was the peak of my mechanical skills right here. I mean, every day washing the bike, filter oil. Obviously, I wasn't doing much like internal engine stuff, but like a lot of that basic maintenance, I was doing all that. And so when I got on the podium in Oakland, and actually I think I was second there for quite a while too before Coop passed me.
Mhm.
I was just like, man, maybe this is what it's going to take. Like, hopefully, this is the point where I can finally have the result in Supercross to get that ride.
Yeah, do you think it took so long because did people view you as more of like an outdoor guy and the Supercross wasn't as strong? Like, does it, because you had some, as a privateer, you had some decent results up until this point. Yeah, you weren't on the podium, but it wasn't like you were struggling to, get top tens or making mains or anything like that. Were you kind of surprised it took so long to get to this point and still not have a factory ride, or did you knew after this point that you were deserving of one?
Yeah, I think that honestly the biggest thing was I was just short and I wasn't that good in the whoops. I mean, I think That really was the crux of the matter. Like I've said this, I feel like a lot. Like if I would have just been like 2 or 3 inches taller, my whole Supercross career would have been different. And honestly, probably true. Like at this point in time, I think I had 15 mil taller foot pegs, and that really helped me a lot. And this year, especially with West Coast, the way the whoops are there, just to get through the whoops and give me a little bit more clearance. Um, but yeah, it's hard because the industry is so focused on Supercross results, and it doesn't really matter if you get podiums, top fives, or top tens outdoors. You have to be the full package. And with getting this Supercross podium, it finally like made me look like the full package to the factory teams.
Yeah, and I think even before you got to this point, I mean, you were on the radar, and I want to say like a fan favorite because you were like the top privateer all the time, and everybody, you read the Vital MX forums, they'd be like, give this guy a factory ride, and things like that. So I think that had to probably be a big relief off your back when you finally got the podium here.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
So you go in from here, you have a pretty good 2015, and then you go into 2016, and you sign with Star Racing Yamaha for that year. I think that, I mean, that's really, I mean, obviously those bikes are really good too, but that was a really good year for you. Supercross wise and motocross wise, you look at here at Glen Helen 2016, you go 2-2 for your first overall, beating your brother. That had to have
Mm.
been pretty surreal, with you both standing on the podium.
Yeah, no, I mean, I look back at the like the amount of motivation and focus and energy I had for those couple years because I was pretty fortunate where I had a really bad wrist injury in 2013 when I was still on the 1110 mods Yamaha. And then so yeah, and the 1110s went from Honda to Yamaha that year. And so then 14, 15, and 16, like I didn't have any injuries, I didn't break any bones. So I really had this like really good progression where I was just able to do every race, keep building the fitness. And then the team situation, like 2015, like Christina and the Rock River guys had like such a great package for not just being shy of a factory team. It was a really good building block to lead into the star year of 2016. And I mean, I was really motivated. I had my brother was training with Osho, and like we did a lot of off-season prep, a lot of 2 3 hour bike rides, like day after day. So my fitness was really, really good. And then I actually remember having kind of it was a rough Supercross season in 2016, and yeah, I just came out swinging, started training with Gareth Swanepoel for the outdoors, and just came out swinging. And yeah, to get my first win here at Glen Helen, like that was awesome. That was a really, really special feeling.
And how did it feel going to the next round with the red plate on your bike and not your brother's?
Oh, I'm not gonna laugh. Kind of felt like a badass. Yeah, it felt pretty cool. uh,
Yeah, you had a good summer that year. You won at Washougal, and I mean, you were in the championship fight for the whole series, right? So that was, I mean, compared to other seasons, obviously you had good seasons, but I mean, man, you were like one of the top guys this entire season here.
yeah, no, I look back and I had quite a few regrets with 2016 though, because like my bike blew up in the first moto at High Point, which that was obviously because my brothers blew up the second moto, so that was
Yep.
kind of a controversial weekend. But it's like
Hmm.
I would have had the overall there with a 2-2. And then I threw away the overall at Redbud, like last lap leading there, and then threw away an overall at Millville. So it's like I could have very easily had four wins there in that season instead of two, but shoulda, coulda, woulda, right?
Yeah.
But no, and the thing that made this whole thing cool getting the red plate at Glen Helen was just the fact that it wasn't like I was a rookie that just came in and just had this factor ride. Like the fact that I had to kind of grind, year for year after year to get to that point just made it really feel special.
Yeah, because it's not very often that, you were almost 8 years into your career at this point. You don't see it happen very often where someone starts off as a privateer and works their way up after that many years into a factory ride. Usually a lot of guys come out of amateurs, have those factory rides and they keep it or lose it. But your story is kind of unique where you really grinded it out, like you said, and put yourself in this position to earn these type of rides.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, it was not an easy road for sure, and I mean, I would do it again for sure, but in the moment, there was a lot of despair and just like, God dang, what's it going to take to get to this point? But I mean, that year, that was probably the best bike of my career. I would say 2016, though. I really liked that Star bike and definitely took for granted how good it was then. I think that Yamaha was really leaps and bounds ahead of every other team at that time. So.
Yeah, I was going to ask. So, you ride in the Rock River Yamaha, and when you jump on this Star bike, were you just like, wow, like this thing is just insane? Or was it similar, or was it just on a whole other level than what you have ridden before?
It was similar. Yeah, that Rock River bike was good because they were renting engines from Yamaha, so it was a good, B program, I will say. But I mean, the thing with Star and a lot of these factory teams is like they have a guy that does engine stuff, right? 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, chassis guy, suspension guy. So they have people that are working in all these departments, like that's just their job. So they're trying to make little fine tweaks and tunes every day, just to try and progress the bike. And so like Star now fast forward, 8 years, like that's still what they're doing. Um, so it's hard to compete with that when you're a privateer team.
Yeah, and so you rode for Star Racing Yamaha for 2016, and then you switched to KTM in 2017. Was there a part of you that wanted to stay with Star? I mean, you finished second in points in outdoors, and you won 2 overalls, and you were in the championship hunt. Was that not an opportunity you had, or did you want to stay, or were you just ready to move on?
Uh, I mean, that's definitely something I'll regret. I still regret. I wish I would have stayed at Star for sure. I don't know. I had it in my head that I wanted to go KTM. I wanted to be a Red Bull athlete with KTM TLD and do the Alden thing. Like I really, at that time, I think a lot of guys. I mean, you've seen it with Christian and other people. Cooper going from Star to KTM just to see what Alden is all about. But I mean, in retrospect, I would have for sure won more and maybe even been in closer to a title the years after that if I would have stayed on Star. Like, and I enjoyed my time over at TLD, Red Bull KTM. Like I really did, and I learned a lot. And honestly, probably wouldn't troll training probably wouldn't be a thing if it wasn't for my time down there and learning that and learning what not to do
Yeah,
in some
right.
cases. So
Yeah, no
uh,
kidding.
I mean, there was a lot of stuff that I learned there where I just like drove me crazy and drove me to go get like a strength and conditioning certification and pursue the knowledge with the physical side of things. But yeah, that was a really good package that year.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we lose sight of it, even like at us in our normal world, where the new and shiny looks more appealing for whatever reason, and then you're like, sometimes it's not always, and it doesn't have to be the wrong decision, but sometimes you always look back like, yeah, maybe that would have been, I could have stayed there, and it would have been just as fine.
Mhm.
So, but
Yeah.
staying in 2016, you obviously had that good outdoor season, and you were selected to go to the Motocross of Nations. You, Webb, and Anderson. Looking at this photo, I mean, did you ever think you'd be in this position when you turned pro 2008? That first photo we looked at.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing too is I raced for Team Puerto Rico for 2 years, 13 with Phil being my teammate. We did Tuchenthal, Germany, and then the year after that with Ben LeMay as my teammate in Latvia. And never would I have thought that a couple years later I'd be riding for Team USA. I mean, I just feel like to be selected for Team USA is kind of like the crowning or pinnacle achievement in US motocross. I mean, that is such an honor, and there's so much history there and so much storied history of being a member of Team USA. So to be picked for that was really, really awesome. And Cooper and Jason, I feel like we had a really good team coming in there. And man, we were so close to winning.
I know. I was looking back at it. I remember watching that race, and I just was kind of reliving it this morning, looking at it. And I mean, I'm from the USA, so I mean that was ours to win. I mean, we go in there. Jason wins that moto, has that crazy freak accident where that guy lands on him after he's already won the race on the finish line. And then the final moto, you guys were still in the running for the win, and Coop has that small little tip over. I think it was on the last lap. So you guys were just so close. And I mean, yeah, you still finished on the podium. You got to pop some champagne, but it felt like it was just there, right? Like you guys were it was meant to be. And it just, that little tiny slip, it happened at the end.
I know. Yeah, Coop blew it for us.
I think he's still mad about it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, probably. I mean, I'll never forget being on the podium. Like, just me and Cooper up there. Jason's in the hospital. Doesn't know where he's at. Doesn't know his name. And then Coop's literally like Cooper was in tears. I felt so bad. Like he was wearing sunglasses just because he was in tears. And I'm just like, freaking yeah, Team USA, let's go. And I was stoked because we still podiumed,
Yeah.
so that was exciting. But it's like, especially with the dry spell that Team USA had there for such a long time, I'm like, man, we could have been like the one victory in that kind of dry spell era.
Yeah, I mean, you podiumed with basically two guys, right? Anderson couldn't race anymore. You had to drop that score.
Mhm.
And then Cooper, that was his first race on a 450. You all did really good. It
Mhm.
was just crazy the bad luck that we had. I mean, with Jason obviously on that finish line jump and then Coop falling over, but it was overall still a solid performance. And I'm sure that's something that, that's a lifetime memory that you'll always have.
Yeah. No, and one thing I was kind of bummed about too was DeCoster decided to have the 250 guy start like on the outside gate. And so I mean both motos I had, it comes from outside the top 20, and I think I was either 8-8 or 9-9. Can't
Mhm.
remember exactly, but so to be in that track was really hilly, like the roost was brutal. Like I had scars on my hands for like a year after that moto. Because I didn't wear hand guards, which was that's totally on me. But I've like rode my ass off to go, get those finishes and to pass those 450s up those hills. So I was like, I left it all on the table for that day.
Yeah, and they say the 250 rider is almost the most important, right? That's like you have to hold the team together, and you guys have obviously had a disadvantage off the starts against the 450s in the 450 race and the open race, and so and then having the outside gate pick. I mean, you were just fighting an uphill battle the whole time.
Oh yeah, definitely not easy.
So
Yeah.
you go, obviously I think that might be one of the highlights of your career. I think it would if I was selected to obviously race for our country outside of our country on a team like that. You get a podium, you race a couple more years, Supercross outdoors, 250 class. I mean, you had good seasons, but 2018, you also finished second in the points in the outdoors.
Yep.
And then, 2022, you decided, which I didn't know it was going to be your last year. I think you kind of hinted at it, but I don't know if anybody actually believed it. But then
Mm.
2022, you decided, hey, I'm going to go race 450 full time Supercross outdoors. This is at Anaheim 1 2022, very first 450 Supercross race. What was going through your mind as you were a longtime 250 rider, and then you decided to make that switch to 450 in the premier class? Was it just kind of surreal compared to the 250 class competitions? Obviously, you have a bunch of champions in there. It had to have been pretty gnarly.
Yeah, I will say like I now understand like the why people need a 450 rookie learning year. It's just a whole nother ball game. For me being in the 250 class for a long time, you get to the point where as you're the older person in the class, you're racing kids. And so it's easy to think that you have those kids like mentally, right? That you have the advantage and you have them covered. Obviously, you have people like Jet that come up and they're
Yeah.
kind of like a generational rider, but so mentally, like I had the 250 class, I was in a good spot. And then moving up to the 450 class, man, when you're seeing Tomac and Anderson, Barsh, and all these guys, you're like, holy shit, this is a whole nother ball game. So it took me a good half of the 450 just to kind of the 450 Supercross season to get mentally wrap my head around like racing those guys. But yeah, like I said earlier, like I think off camera, basically by the second or third round, I was like, "Yep, I'm going to retire this year." And in the back of my mind, going in, my wife and I were, our plan was to, try 450 for the year, but ultimately we wanted to sell the place in Florida and move back to Minnesota and start a family. That was a big thing for us, as we were at that time 30, would have been 32. Um, and we were, same age. So we were looking to kind of just, like I said, the whole privateer saga and then in the factories teams for a long time. Like we've been doing it a long time. Like she had sacrificed a lot to be down in Florida with me. She was taught, elementary school for many, many years. And yeah, we just we were ready to be done. But yeah, going in, looking back at Anaheim 1, and like I definitely wanted to give it a go in the 450 for at least 1 year.
Yeah, and you think that someone at your level, obviously, where you're, race winner and title contender for a couple of years, that when you get to the 450 class, you wouldn't think the names on the back of the jerseys would, I guess, make you think about it just because you're at that level. But I guess when you see guys like Roxon, Tomac, and those guys around, you still have that kind of off feeling where you wouldn't think someone at your level would.
Yeah, no, and I mean part of it was probably just from being 250 class guy for so long. Like I only ever watched those guys on TV. Um, so I wasn't really like wrapping my head around racing them one day. But I mean, I don't know, it's kind of just a different situation too when you're on the gate, like a main event with lots of crowd, watching 50, 60,000 people. Because I would do a lot of training with Kenny at Sandbox and Chase and Adam. So it wasn't like, you know, yeah, it was just a different dynamic for sure. But
Yeah, definitely. And then I think about it too. So you rode a 250 for a long time. You rode a 450. And then you think about it sometimes you can speak to this better than I can, but some guys can ride a 250 better than a 450, right? So was it tough to adapt to a 450 in Supercross and motocross where you felt like you could almost do better on a 250?
well, so that was one thing I learned too, Brant, was I think I definitely and genuinely am a 250 guy. I can say that, 5'4", 140 pounds. Just dude, that 450 scared the shit out of me. I'm not gonna lie. And I feel like I just slowed it down all year long to the point where I literally it probably was almost slower than stock and Supercross at some point in time. But it made it to where, I mean, I was on my head so often, and the slower I made the bike, the more comfortable I was, but the less I crashed. So for me, that was a win-win. Just trying to learn how to ride that bike. Like I said, I'm not tall, and I definitely there's something about that bike. Like I know Mathis was kind of making a joke, an ongoing joke about me having like the XL version of the 450. I'm like, dude, I don't know. It was a stock bike, you know.
Yeah, they said it's the same size as the 250, but I don't know what it was. It looked like yours was way taller than the normal ones.
Yeah. So and like this summer, I'm riding. I got a gas 350 from Vite Cycle, a local dealership, and I look big on it. Like I look normal on it compared to the Yamaha 450. So I don't know what it was about that bike.
Yeah, no, I can imagine, and there's nothing wrong. And, there's this controversy sometimes about guys, the career 250 class, or whatever. But I feel like at that professional level, and maybe we'll get to that point, but it's still the top level of our sport, whether you're a 250 rider, 450 rider, obviously 450 is premier class, but you have some guys that can make a good living in the 250 class. So if you can stick it out there, why not, right? Rather than move up to the 450 where you might have to do it on your own and you don't have a salary. I think, that really comes down to the individual. And if you can make a living riding a dirt bike on a 250, why not?
Yeah, no, I feel like we've kind of had many debates on this in our different podcasts and the Vital Forum and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, when you have a good, 6-figure contract with bonuses, I mean, that's the other thing too. Like I can now understand as a 450 guy when you've, let's say you're like I was roughly making between 23 to 2,500 bucks for a main event, right? And you're racing every single weekend in Supercross, and then you go outdoors and you go 10-10 and you get maybe, 1,000 bucks total.
Right.
You're racing, you're hanging your life on the line for like 70 plus minutes for 1,000 bucks, whereas in Supercross you ride for 20 minutes and you get 2,500 bucks.
Mm-hmm.
So just that something as simple as money like that
Mm-hmm.
makes you kind of realize why people like Supercross a little bit more. But when I was on a 250, we had, pretty big top three bonuses, and I was always capable of being a top three guy outdoors, especially. So I was able to tap into those bonuses a lot of the times outdoors, which is why outdoors for me was made it lucrative.
Yeah. So you raced the whole year, like you said, after round 3 or so that you knew was your last season. Did you ever have a point where you're like, maybe I want one more year just to see how it went? Because you only gave yourself 1 year in the 450 class, or did you just know for sure, like, man, this is pretty much it?
Yeah, I was pretty, yeah. When I feel like when I make my mind up to something, I pretty stick with it. And, we pretty much already committed to selling the house and moving back to Florida. And, like actually, we found out my wife was pregnant in September. So, um, we kind of had the ball in motion. So, and yeah, I don't know, like I said, I had my day in the sun for 15 years, and,
Mhm.
I don't know, I really feel like I got as much as I could out of the sport. I mean, sure, I could maybe race for another 10 years, be the
Be a
John,
Justin Brayton.
yeah, Brayton or John Dow, but I'm just like, I don't know, like there is more to life. Like
Mhm.
the troll training thing's going good, and I enjoy teaching and coaching these kids in the Minnesota area. And, we have a little 4-month-old son now, which I'm pretty excited about that. And, my parents are not getting any younger too. So I helped out a lot with Spring Creek this year, especially
Mhm.
for the national. So it's exciting to pursue some other things in life.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, ultimately, I look back at your career as super successful, especially from where you started, where you ended up, and race winner, and again, contender in the outdoors for championships. And I mean, you got to be pretty stoked with how it all ended up. And now you have this new venture that you're into, and you guys obviously own that Spring Creek motocross track there, and you guys have the national there, so being involved. So it's not like you're stepping away and you're bored. You definitely have plenty of things to do.
Well, yeah, that's for sure. I was a little bit nervous with retiring and not, maybe being in a bad spot mentally. But I gotta say, sometimes I just wish I had more time off because it's been a really, really busy summer. As you know, in Minnesota, there's not much happening in the wintertime. So I mean, my parents really pack a lot of races. I think I was looking, there's like 15 plus events throughout the summer, including the Pro National.
Mhm.
So just between that and the troll training stuff, and obviously family life, there's plenty to keep me preoccupied. And I do ride occasionally, a couple times a month. I say I've been riding the gas 350, and I do get my fix. And I'll be riding with some local pros and, kind of riding on the limit a little bit. And I definitely have to tell myself to back it off a little bit.
Yeah, you have nothing to prove, right? So then, you're in this training side of things, but it probably is nice that you can have dinner and a beer or something like that and not have to think too much about it.
It's great. Love it.
Well, hey man, I appreciate you taking the time to do this with us today. When I was thinking about this new series we had, and you're one of the guys that came to the top of my mind just because, I grew up watching you. You kind of, like we talked about before, I'm the same age, and it was always a unique story for me where you were a privateer and made it to that factory team, where not a lot of guys get that opportunity. So I think it could inspire some people that, you might not be the top amateur coming up, but if you really grind it out and put in results and obviously do all the hard work that it is possible. So yeah, man, we appreciate you taking the time to do this with us today. And yeah, good luck with all your new ventures you have.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, Brent. It's fun to reminisce on the highlights of, my career. Appreciate it.
Definitely, man. Take it easy.
Thanks.